Hi, everyone. Welcome to the B++ podcast, a podcast where we talk about technology trends, what's the absolute latest, and we speak to technology leaders who are doing something phenomenal. And obviously, today I'm very happy and excited because we found just the right individual we were looking for, especially in the marketing technology space. Very happy to have Tim Hill as our guest today. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Abhii. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, so let me just introduce you, to our listeners. And obviously, Tim is the co-founder and CEO of award-winning Social Status. You can check out the website at socialstatus.io. And the way best to describe Social Status would be the Google Analytics of social media. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah, that's definitely one way you can put it. Yeah, exactly. It's essentially a social reporting tool for marketers and advertisers. So, we started the business because it's really time consuming putting social media reports together. And I used to have to do it. I used to work in agencies myself. I had to experience the pain point myself. So, really wanted to create a tool that automates that process, and essentially then I can spend my time working on the strategy and kind of using those insights to make better decisions for the future.
Sure. I mean, sounds wonderful. I mean, sounds like a tool we can start using tomorrow or today, actually. Yeah, I know the pain point, right? We are in that business, not so much the marketing business, but we work with a lot of clients on their digital platforms, and I see the struggles of companies, small and large. And this is
Yeah.
exactly the kind of tool that marketers would be absolutely thrilled with. And so tell us a bit more about your journey. I understand that you were in the development space yourself, then you had a stint in television, and then digital agencies, like you mentioned. So that's quite an exciting journey. So tell us a bit more about how those experiences were and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, it's a good question because yes, I did start off my career in development, and in saying that, though, I never really saw myself going down this road and, starting a company, albeit a marketing technology company, and, creating software that marketers can use. I mean, I studied film and TV at university, so I wanted to make films. That was my background. And I guess that's what got me into TV. I was working in TV here in Australia and Channel 10 for some time. But ultimately, the industry in Australia is quite small for film and TV. And I started getting interested in advertising, kind of natural transition away from TV into advertising, and got into my first advertising agency. And I really loved it.
Right.
The ad agency environment is so, live and work and play hard. Like, it's that kind of, experience that I think you could probably only do for a certain amount of years, because it's pretty taxing. But I loved the diversity of work. I loved the different clients, and I had government clients as well. I had a lot of big business and small business. I've kind of had this ability to work across a number of different client types, and what I found when it came to social media, right? Like, what I found was that no matter how big or small the organization was, the challenges that they face were actually really quite similar. It was always like, what's considered good? Like, when I'm looking at metrics, is that actually good or bad? And then it was, how do we make content better? How do we kind of reach more people? How do we grow engagement? All of the same kinds of questions, no matter who the client was, kept coming up. And that's when I thought, we needed a better way, especially in agency land, needed a better way to understand performance and benchmark it appropriately. Because, one stat in one industry is going to be very different to another marketer in another industry. So that was really the start of Social Status, and it started as a bit of a side project and has grown since there into the platform it is today.
Great. And I mean, I can absolutely relate to that. In fact, I was having that conversation with my marketing manager this morning. The thing that you just mentioned, what is good enough, right? How do you benchmark it, right? So in the sense, is engagement the answer? Are people doing something which is a bit more involved? Are they coming back? So yeah, again, I think the industry is absolutely ready for a. In fact, I won't say ready. I think the industry has been craving for a tool like that, and
Yeah.
like I said, the marketers especially. And I also I think read somewhere, maybe your comment about the fact that this is something, a tool for anybody who has a KPI of marketing on social media,
Right.
and the fact that they need to always constantly justify to the CMOs and any decision makers why they should do what they are doing, and whether it's being effective at all. So do you hear a lot from marketers who say, well, that's made my life a lot easier now that I have access to this tool?
Exactly. I mean, that is, literally what keeps us going, and what is the fuel for us and the team to, keep developing the product, is when we hear, feedback back from users that say, basically, without a tool like this, there's actually
Hmm.
no way to get the breadth of insights on performance, especially for agencies that are doing this across lots of different clients. So,
Right.
some of those clients, if you think of organizations that are, say, multi-location, like a shopping
Right.
center group, for example, or, a gym chain or a restaurant chain, any of these kinds of organizations that have lots of social profiles,
Hmm.
uh, previously that was really quite impossible to report across the whole group and try to identify, things that are working and things that aren't working. And so that's, I guess, square one. The second thing that's really popped up recently is just like the fragmentation that's happening in social. So you've got all these new channels, you've got TikTok and Byte and, Triller, and there's all of these emerging new platforms, and then within the
Right.
platforms themselves there's emerging media formats. So you look at Instagram just by itself, and you've got Reels, IGTV, and Stories, which is now a few years old, but there's just so much complexity for a digital marketer. So with the need for automation around reporting, and then now this need to kind of almost like pick your battles, like what channel, what media format, what opportunities are there that we need to hone in on, because it's pretty impossible to try to do it all unless you're a really large organization.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, as you rightly said, we've seen multiple times, with a lot of organizations trying to do something for the sake of doing something on each of these platforms, and like you rightly said, pick your battles. And for instance, we're a B2B business and you're selling insurance technology products, you don't probably need to be on TikTok, right? Or
Exactly.
so, but we see every now and then that some CEO has an interesting conversation with his daughter at breakfast and suddenly comes and says, I want to do something on TikTok. So
Yeah,
I guess, this is also a tool for marketers to sort of push back on some of those ridiculous requests, I guess, and, and focus on something that really will deliver results for them. So is
that's
it
it.
safe to understand that the product, the platform is targeted towards marketers and agencies, or do you see a broader reach, broader sort of use case across organizations now or in the future?
I would say, so our user base is about
Mm.
60 to 70% agencies.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is brands, organizations of
Mm.
all sorts. So, I like to see as well, just within, if we just look at, the companies, there's everything from sole traders and, small businesses, individuals who are, running their own thing, like a photographer, for example, whose
Mm-hmm.
business relies on, getting new leads from Facebook and Instagram, all the way
Right.
through to, a global organization. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it is a pretty diverse group, but
Mm.
then fundamentally, they're again kind of trying to answer the same questions. I think what's interesting as well is, like if we look at the use cases, reporting formats. So how do these individuals want to extract insights from the platform? Is it actually just give me a PDF or give me a PowerPoint? That's
Mm-hmm.
generally the use case for agencies, because they're then white labeling and then, passing it on to the client. But for
Right.
organizations, it's a little bit different. They're much more interested in browsing, looking at the dashboard, looking at the actual platform itself. And, I find it interesting, especially where some users have very specific metrics that they want to benchmark. For example, say the engagement rate, that's probably the most common, or something like the reach or organic reach rate. And how, especially, something like the organic reach rate, there's this perception that organic reach is falling on social channels, especially Facebook. But, sometimes that's really not the case. Like we can see on channels like Instagram, again, kind of depending on your industry, sometimes you're seeing actually organic reach going up and bucking this trend where, a lot of the kind of trade press and that kind of thing is saying, well, organic reach is dying or it's dead. Sometimes that's not the case. And also, more and more organizations, they're not just creating content, they're also curating or remixing existing content, or they're working with others like influencers and creators. And I think increasingly organizations are having this kind of collaborative approach to their content. So I think now that when they're looking at their metrics, they're going, wow, that stuff that we were doing ourselves, that was okay. But then in comparison to, collaborating with a customer or collaborating with, some key people in the organizations, I love this idea of like organizations working with their CEO, their CMO, or whatever it is, to, almost pick out internal influencers or internal brand ambassadors and working with them on a kind of personal level, because the cut through, especially on LinkedIn, is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like you said, for agencies, obviously it's a godsend. You can send lovely, beautiful reports to your clients, and something that I've seen hundreds of marketers struggle with over the years. And like you said, for organizations, it's so important to not only treat it as a reporting tool, but actually, look at the insights that it provides you, and that can shape future strategy and marketing plans. And that's all that, any CMO or marketing director can ask for. So that's wonderful. So, I mean, let's talk about the business model, right? Because every time, the world is so excited about software as a service, SaaS, as people call it. And, it's so sexy right now, and everyone wants to build SaaS platforms. But as a SaaS platform founder, I mean, I want you to sort of share with our listeners how difficult it is to get those, subscribers, get those people to sort of sign up for paid subscriptions or something, and something that we see over and over again. And, when companies come to us and, they say, oh, we want to build a SaaS platform, And my first question always is, what's your marketing plan, and how do you plan to roll out and everything? Because, of course, you need a robust product, but then even then, the battle, I wouldn't say even half the battle is won, right? The battle's just getting started. So how's that been for you? Did you find it very challenging? Did you sort of stumble upon some secret mantras of getting people on the platform? Please do share.
Yeah, absolutely. How challenging has it been? Extremely. It's really tough. I like to think of a tweet that Joel, the founder of Buffer, the social scheduling tool, said once on Twitter, where he said, if you're starting out in SaaS, buckle up, because you're in for a hell of a ride. It is a hell of a ride. It's really hard. I think for us, being freemium, I think this, some founders look at freemium as, a bit of a kind of risk, because you end up having a whole bunch of free users, and so this is kind of, I guess, the Hootsuite model. If we're talking about models here, is, 98% of the user base is free, and then you're actually making your money on that tiny percentage that pay. Now, we really struggled with pricing at the start. I think this is a very common thing I hear talking about other founders, is pricing is just so hard. And I don't know whether anyone's really happy with pricing, talking to other founders. Like, it always is that thing that's just like,
Mm.
I'm sure there's something better we could be doing with pricing. But so when we started off, a lot of advice that we were getting was, you're too cheap,
Mm.
you're too cheap. You got to raise your prices. And so, we raised prices and we could struggle to convert. And I think
Right.
that this idea of just simply looking at prices and then making a call, um, it misses all of that other detail about how people are finding you, how they're assessing you against competitors. Like it's really different per
Mm.
market. So I'm always
Mm.
so hesitant to listen to general advice. I think like when I talk to other founders who are asking me, I always say, I don't know, and my experience is going to be so different to your industries, and you really have to try it.
Right.
And that idea of just kind of testing with pricing, sometimes that's actually quite hard to do, because where you're acquiring new users changes over time as well. So sometimes you can get kind of false signals. But I
Mm-hmm.
would say for us in the early days, yeah, pricing was tricky. Also, we were up against some competitors that were quite far along. And,
Mm-hmm.
although we were doing things differently and I guess prioritizing different functionalities and features,
Mm-hmm.
when a marketer was trialing us in comparison to others, we
Mm.
just didn't stack up in terms of ticking all the boxes. So it's
Right.
taken us like many years to get the product kind of functional where we can actually win against other competitors.
Right.
And, one thing that I've always thought was super valuable was maintaining a free version of the product, so that there is that, still a foot, in that free camp where you can really build a base of engaged users that may one day, when they have that need for something a bit more powerful, step up,
Mm.
because that step up is fairly low. Like our entry point is $29 a month, so it's quite accessible for a lot of
Right.
businesses. And yeah, I think that having that engaged free base rather than just free trial for 14 days and then you get cut off and then that's it,
Yeah.
means that we really did. We were really quite inspired by what Hootsuite had achieved in
Mm.
the publishing and scheduling world. We wanted to
Right.
emulate that in analytics.
Right. Wonderful. I mean, thanks for being so transparent, and
Oh,
because this
pleasure.
is this is invaluable, right? I think a lot of founders out there, they would be like, wow, this is exactly the problem that I'm facing today. So every time we work with startups, and we see some of the challenges that they are facing in the SaaS space, is like you mentioned, if you it's the 14-day trial. So is your product compelling enough for people to continue using it? In most cases it's not, right? Because
Yeah.
products
Yeah.
need to evolve as well. So
Yeah.
freemium is always a great way to go, because at least you always have them. So as you're rolling out new features, you can send them an EDM saying, try out a new feature. Maybe that sort of pushes them to purchase the subscription. And then of course,
Yes.
pricing is again always a tricky one, because you don't want to alienate people by pricing it too high, but at the same time, the whole idea is, if you keep it low, how many thousands and thousands of users do you need to sort of start making any serious money? So again, I
Yeah.
mean, we are all trying to figure that out. I mean, my sort of theory on that is that keep the price low, and obviously keep focusing on the depth of the product. And I think what I saw on the social status website is that you have multiple pricing tiers as well. So I think
Yeah.
that always helps in a way that people can find what they are looking for. So not everyone may be able to pay $1,000 plus every month, but at the same time they are happy to spend maybe $200-300, and then it's a more gradual sort of a move towards all the features and everything, which I thought was very clever. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, then the other thing I wanted to discuss, again from a founder's perspective, is you have raised some capital, I believe, and so that's also in fact, I'm currently mentoring a couple of startups, and they were just asking, should we start approaching the VCs already? And so they are still in the development stage, and one getting closer to more on an alpha beta kind of a stage. So I always, I'm a bit conservative in terms of when you should, go and speak to the, VCs. Maybe a different story for angels. So, firstly, I mean, what are some of the steps that you would, maybe recommend to a founder before they go out there, start raising money? What's a good time to start raising money? And what kind of challenges do you think they can expect?
I think for founders starting out, ironically, a good time to raise money is when you're not making any money.
Okay.
I've just kind of found that, now that we've been in market for a while, the minute that you actually start having revenue trickle in, everything becomes about your revenue, right? So, when we raised, that was quite early on, right? So that was quite a few years ago now, and it was an angel round, and I think it made it a lot more. Look, put it this way, I think the focus was much more on the opportunity and the team and what we had achieved so far and where we were wanting to go, versus all the hard figures of MRR and churn rate and growth rate and all that kind of stuff. So I think for founders starting out, it's useful to know which track you're going to go down, although you don't necessarily have to, but whether you're going to bootstrap this, you're going to grow it organically, and you're going to kind of do it yourself, and then maybe look at these new hybrid things like taking debt instead of equity and that kind of thing. And now with all these revenue-based financing, like I think that's a really viable option for a lot of companies.
Sure.
Versus do you look to do angel or seed, or go down that road where essentially you're much more kind of getting towards that idea of raising multiple times. Again, you don't have to. Like, we've only raised the one time, and it's not like there's any pressure on us to raise. But we were kind of interested in going back out to market last year, and of course, that was really hard when a lot of funds were just not willing to talk to you when the kind of industry was closing up. But it's I think that when you're starting out, if I think back to when we raised, it was connecting with angels or these high net worth individuals that immediately got it. That was probably the thing that summarizes the view of a few of our early angels, is that they got it straight up. Like we weren't necessarily earning any revenue from it because we were very early on with the product, but they got the opportunity. They could see it in market. Others were executing in the space. We were convinced that there was a better way to do it. And, we had a version of the product that was working well with a few test customers. And so, we were able to raise, 300K Australian dollars. But I think that's without that, it's hard. And there were lots of meetings and lots of cups of coffee that I had to have in order to find those people that actually, really, really kind of got it.
Yeah. Great. I think I'll take many takeaways from what you just said. And again, like I said, nothing like a founder sharing his experience. And I can't even tell you how much is going to help hundreds of founders or, budding entrepreneurs out there. And the 2 or 3 things that really stand out for me based on what you said is, one, start raising money before, making any revenue. So the pre-revenue stage. Because then people say, oh, you're only making $5,000. That's not exciting at all, because then it's all about the numbers. So that's very interesting. The second thing you mentioned was also the fact that, try and find angels, who probably look at the opportunity in a different way and who don't necessarily, follow a rule book in terms of we will invest in a company when it's at this stage or whatever else it is. So if you have an inspiring product and you're very confident about it and you have the MVP with some users and it's been tested out, then that's a good time to approach an angel. And the third thing that I feel, what you said really stood out for me is the team, right? So, I mean, there is no business out there, no startup out there, which is worthy of any kind of investments if, the investors don't believe in the team. So my next question actually is going to be based on the team itself. So, again, I do something called the Startup Success Bootcamp at some of the universities here. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time on for these entrepreneurs is finding the right team. And I'm glad you sort of touched upon it. One is, so my question to you is, when you have an idea like that, so I mean, of course, is there anything that you do other than, of course, trying to find somebody with a complementary skill set that you should look for in a co-founder? And moving beyond co-founders, for the first, let's say, 5 people or 10 people, is there something that you should look for? That's number one. And secondly, how are you doing it currently? Is your development team based locally, or do you have remote developers? Because now that we live in this remote world, does it make a difference? Because one of the concerns obviously is intellectual property protection. You don't want to be sharing too much with somebody who's like 10,000 miles away and things like that. So what's your view on building that core team and developing locally versus remotely?
I really kind of feel the pain that a lot of founders experience when they're right at the start of their journey and they're trying to find a co-founder. That's really hard. It's really, really hard. I see it myself. I'm working in a co-working place myself here, and you see the early stage companies that are like, I'm trying to find a co-founder, and they're going to networking events, and ultimately, that kind of thing. Back in the day when we went to networking events, that was a decent way to get out into the community and find others. I think where you can really find success with a co-founder is, I think, literally just by starting and seeing how the relationship goes. I think it's very hard to judge this until you actually start working together for a period of time. And so as a solo founder, I would suggest like 2 solo founders to start working with someone just on a freelance basis and see how it goes for some weeks, some months, if you can do that, because I kind of feel like this is the same as well with employees. I find that, when I think back to my time in agencies and how agencies used to recruit, these individuals used to go through rounds and rounds of interviews, and they might have excelled by, interview number 6, and then they start the job, and after the first week, everyone hates them. And it's just like, why have we, spent so much time interviewing these people when they haven't actually sat with the team and done some work? So I always tend to find that, just kind of killing yourself doing interviews is not the right idea. I think working on a real ad hoc basis at the start, whether that's a co-founder or just, an employee, is a really good first step. And especially in a team environment, having everyone decide collaboratively, that's probably a very tech thing to do, and absolutely doesn't happen outside of tech that much. But I think that's really a good way to do it, because to answer your third question, we are a remote team. So we were remote from day one. We're all in different places around the world, actually. So our development is out of Brazil, and I'm co-founder and I are in Australia, and then we have analysts in the Philippines. So we've always been on Zoom. And kind of now that the world has moved to Zoom and Teams and Slack and all these tools, that's been how a lot of tech companies have been working. I do see where organizations are more outsourcing. As you said, with IP, that's a really big issue potentially. And so we haven't really outsourced it's been more about finding individuals who are passionate about, the why that we're doing this, and can also, see the value of where this is going and get excited about the market. And and finding those people wherever they are, like whether or not they're here in my city or on the other side of the world. Time zones and that kind of thing hasn't been really a big issue. We've managed to get everything down to the stand-up being asynchronous. So basically everything in the organization is asynchronous. So it can be done, and there's a lot of companies that blog about this, like Buffer. I keep mentioning Buffer, but there's templates, I guess, where you can see other organizations doing this well, and not not to feel like there's any limits on how you can work, but then also being mindful about these kinds of marketplaces like Upwork or freelancer.com. They're not bad, but I do see that a lot of founders have run into problems where they're just simply outsourcing.
Yeah, absolutely. So hiring dedicated people as opposed to trying freelancers out. The other thing that you mentioned is, instead of interviewing somebody 25 times, get them to work on something small for a short period of time to see whether they are any good, or are they good to work with, and not a total nightmare. So so those are some of the things I'm sure people can learn a lot from. So when you say that's fascinating, right? So you're here, somebody's sitting in Brazil, somebody's in the Philippines, and that's like a dream come true for a lot of founders out there, right? So who are struggling. And like you said, I like the way you said, back when we used to go for networking events or something. It's like, it already feels like half a century ago,
doesn't it? It feels so long ago.
Yeah, exactly. I remember 3 years back, somebody was trying to recommend networking events to me, and I've always sort of found them to be a bit unproductive, to be kind to them. Actually, I could say worse things, but so yeah, and so I'm so glad that the world has moved on from those networking events. So anyway, coming back to the point of hiring those teams. So, okay, so if we can't find some of those people on, say, Fiverr and freelancer.com and Upwork and everything, so how would a founder, let's say, sitting in Malaysia or New Zealand, how would he or she, look for like-minded people who can get behind the, like you said, the why? And what's a platform that you would use? Would it be LinkedIn?
Actually, LinkedIn has there's good opportunity on LinkedIn. Some LinkedIn groups that I'm part of, you can find like-minded people. What I've also found with other groups that seem to have a lot of value these days are Slack communities. I'm part of a few Slack communities, specifically in MarTech, in digital marketing and that kind of thing. And they're really not too dissimilar to LinkedIn, though, in that having the ability to have thematic conversation in a community, I think that was a really simple thing, and it's ultimately borrowed from internet relay chat in the 90s. But wow, that's so powerful. If you have a few hundred, a few thousand people in one place, but you've got strategy, jobs, introduction, like all these themes, all these channels that you can jump into and then have conversation about that theme. I think that's really been where I've seen in these Slack communities. That's really been where there's a lot of values. You can get to the point really, really quickly, where that's hard to do sometimes on LinkedIn, where everyone's approaching from different angles. The other thing, I think, thinking back to when we made our first hires, was we were actually part of an accelerator. So we joined, and we were really lucky to get into the Hackers and Founders Accelerator in San Jose. And that connected us with a number of people, where I think that's a really great outcome of going to an accelerator, is that they're really, for that short amount of time, 90 days or however long these accelerator programs are, their mission is to connect you with as many people that they can to help you. And ultimately, our employee number one came from a connection to someone in a university who was the lecturer, who we were, looking for a great Ruby on Rails developer. And this lecturer said, I've got a A+ student that you have to meet. And suddenly, we had that connection, right? So, we would not have found them if it wasn't for that connection. And I think, there are a lot of accelerators, and there are many now that are distributed, and they're accepting applications from all over the world. So I think the barriers have come down, as you said, where you're mentioning founders in, I think you'd say kind of more remote countries. There's no barrier now. You can get into Jason Calacanis's accelerator if you're on the other side of the world now. So I think it's a lot more accessible. So now that there's more of them as well, and plus, you get some a few dollars out of it as well. Hackers and founders, interestingly, the way that they worked was there wasn't actually a payment. They didn't make an investment in the company. It was basically a service-based arrangement where, as that came part of that was, the connections and getting you wherever you are in your journey, helping you get to the next step. But yeah, I think at the very least, having, I've gotten really back into Twitter recently as well, just kind of the last thing to add in. It's funny, like I've had a Twitter account for some time and was quite dormant, I think, for the last few years, but it seemed to have been really during the pandemic that I've gotten back into Twitter, and the conversations that you can have and connect with people there are, I think, really quite invaluable. And I would add that to the list of, the Slack groups and LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups is Twitter, is written off a lot, but in the tech community, I think there's a great place to network.
Sure, great. So, I mean, just summarizing, the founders or like anybody looking to sort of develop anything remotely can look at Slack communities, LinkedIn groups, accelerators, Twitter, of course, like you mentioned. So basically, don't hesitate, just get out there and speak to people and speak to as many people as possible. And you don't have to do that physically now that everything's happening, virtually in any case. So yeah, thanks for those insights. Talking about, social status, what's next? What's next for you from a product perspective, and what's next for you from a business perspective for 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, well, product-wise, where we're going ultimately with social status is predictive analytics. So right now, the product's really focused on looking back in time. When you've already executed, for last month, the product's really great at going, okay, here's what you did, and here's how it compared to competitors, etc. Where we want to go is much more about helping. I don't think we'll ever get. Put it this way, I think it's going to be really hard to automate strategy, but I think it's really about enabling strategy to the extent where, the product can get to saying, here's what you should do for next month. If you then execute that according to the plan of what is being put together, then the assessment of how that went becomes a lot more interesting, because it's based on predictions that the model has made, what you've executed, in line with those predictions, or not, like what you've ignored and then done something different. So we really want to get to that stage of being able to, sort reporting back in time, but also suggest what to do in the future. Sure. There's a few in the space, but it is really quite early on, and I think that still practically, sitting down with some of these tools and actually using them, they're very much, I would say, on rails, in that you're kind of like, it's very kind of simple at this stage, and I think that there's still a long way to go. So whether that's going to be cracked this year or maybe at some point in the future, there's going to take some time, I think, to get there. But for the business, I think, what we've ultimately tried to be is the product of choice when it comes to understanding social performance. And while that's just becoming so much harder to do, I think that always means that goal is always going to be in front of us. When you even look at, even other things like how people's usage is changing of social media, with social media now becoming, much more of a mainstream topic in terms of, we're spending too much time on social media, or there's all this fake news, and they're stealing all my data, and all this kind of anxiety around social media, that affects how people use the channels. And so, as marketers, we're aware that channels are fragmenting and things are getting a lot more complex in terms of creating content, but now people are actually behaving a lot more differently. Usage is changing, and devices, we're spending more time on mobile, and I think it's almost like kind of building a product on shifting sands, because it's just always in flux. So
Yeah.
I think that this challenge is always going to be there, and I really feel that I'm going to be battling this until as long as I can see.
Yeah, like I think we're all in the same boat, and that's the world that we live in. Things are sort of moving so dramatically. And in fact, if somebody says, I think I know what I'm going to do for the next 5 years. So, like for instance, this is one of the questions I used to ask back in the day. What do you plan to do for the next 5 years? Now I ask them, what do you plan to do for the next 6 months or something? And
Yes,
so, so I've changed my definition of long term. So
long
now I
term, yeah.
say, yeah. So now I say short term is today and this week. Medium term is from today to the next 3 months, and long term is 3 months to 12 months.
Yeah. Oh, I
After
totally
that,
agree.
yeah. After that, we may have another pandemic. Who knows, right? So
Yes,
maybe we have another virus lurking around the corner, right? So yeah,
exactly.
that's exciting. I mean, I think like you said, the predictive space can be very exciting, and yeah, I know it's early days in that space as well, because I can't think of many tools which are doing it and doing it effectively. So I think that's a very interesting space that you're getting into, and I wish you all the best for that.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure you're gonna crack that. And since you sort of touched upon this for a bit in terms of how everything's changing in the technology world, especially in the social media space, and you probably understand social media space better than most people out there. So what are some of the trends that you're picking up on? You mentioned earlier, during our discussion about how Facebook's slowing down a bit. Instagram's always trying to be a bit more like TikTok. TikTok has its own kind of struggles to deal with. So
Yeah.
if you were to make, let's say, your own prediction for a trend that's emerging or a product that's emerging in social media over the next 12 to 24 months, what would that be?
I'll I like the idea of trying to pick this, because I've historically been terrible at picking trends. The first time I saw the what TikTok was before was Musically. The first time I downloaded Musically, I looked at
Yeah.
it and I just thought, no one's going to do this. No one's going to no one's going to take tracks and do a dance or something. No one's going to do that. And then look at it,
Yeah.
exploded. Yeah. I think where it seems like we're heading is everyone wants to be a creator now. I think that this idea of kind of influencer marketing and working with individuals who have these really big communities, that's one facet of it. But there's this really, really long tail of like what YouTube and TikTok are calling the creator community, which is individuals that have a decent amount of following, and they're all trying to see how they can make it viable enough for them to just do that, so that they don't have to rock up at a 9-to-5 job, and they can create this content and do all these collaborations with brands. So I think what that means in terms of new technologies, new platforms, is that we're going to see much more rich media based channels. And while I say that, ringing in my head is this idea of Clubhouse, which is not rich media, it's just audio only. And so who knows what's going to happen there, but there's certainly a lot of hype about Clubhouse. And so where there's hype, there'll be users piling in, and then ultimately we'll see what happens for the next kind of million users, whether that can grow 10x. But what I would always think is that things the actual media types on these channels will just become more rich. So we're definitely in the era of video at the moment. I feel that for marketers, for individuals, you can get a message out on social. It will probably do a lot better if it's video much more than it will an image. So if that means that as marketers we need to be much more mindful about creating video content, then that will mean that probably it will perform better than the non-video content, and maybe in the future we will see, newer forms of this kind of remixing capability that we're seeing in TikTok and Instagram Reels, being able to edit videos really, really quickly, being able to add styles and effects to videos really, really easily, being able to splice and combine things together. And I think just kind of create rich media content all on your phone really, really easily. So yeah, I would think that it would be the future is much more about rich media, which is a little bit like how it is now, but it'll just become more and more that way, I would say.
Sure, absolutely. And maybe newer versions of TikToks of the world will come out. And I think one of the things that you mentioned just now was so interesting about how platforms will make it easier for people to sort of skip their 9 to 5 lives and turn them into some kind of brand ambassadors, if I may. And brands can work with these individuals. That'll be very interesting. So maybe that's the new form of employment. Who knows what's going to happen, and that's what keeps this space so exciting. And finally, before we wrap up, what's next for Tim? Since you are completely handling a remote team, where do you plan to work from next? Are you already on a digital nomad visa headed somewhere? What do you plan to do as soon as the borders open up and the world comes back to some degree of normalcy?
Yeah, just before the pandemic, I was really looking into this Estonian digital, the Estonian visa. I love the idea, and I would love that freedom to be able to, work out of different countries and experience different cultures. I think that's especially and I think this will be really the case for a lot of founders. What they're working on really has application in many, many cities. I think that when I speak to marketers here in Australia, a marketer in Sydney is thinking about, is reading, is doing, and is working on very similar things, and trying to solve problems that a marketer in Santiago is working on. I find that really fascinating, that wherever we are, the pain points are very similar when you look at this at a kind of industry level. So working in MarTech, working specifically in kind of the social media space, I feel that really you can pick up some interesting cultural insights just through this shared experience of the common pain points around social reporting as experienced by many marketers around the world. Where I would want to live, I mean, I've always loved the idea of spending some working life in the US. I'm not sure. Perhaps maybe the last few years has changed that a little bit, and maybe I'm kind of more interested in Europe. But it also makes me realize that we're quite lucky here in this part of the world. In the APAC region, in regards to where things are at now, it is fairly stable when you compare this to other parts of the world. So I'm very thankful for where we live. But who knows? I've always loved the idea of Europe. So maybe somewhere there in the future. Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be the next conversation that we need to have, because that's an area of huge interest for me. And I won't call myself a bit of an expert, but I do know a few things about that. And I always ask founders about it. And it's so fascinating. We live in a completely digital world. We are hiring remotely. We are running businesses, like you said, which have implications for multiple markets. So why restrict ourselves to one place? And there are so many interesting and exciting places out there. And yes, no place is perfect. And, you may go there and, the Estonian e-residence or entrepreneur residence, and you may just realize 6 months into it that, this is not what everything that it's made out to be. But at the same time, it'll be an experience that you'll never forget. So here's to wishing you all the best, and, 2021 full of experiences. And, hopefully when the next time we speak, you're already in a European country, building a team in Europe and rolling out the product, in those markets. Thank you so much, Tim. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thanks, Abhii.
And
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, and for all the listeners, just a reminder, go check out socialstatus.io. It's a wonderful platform. If you're a marketer, if you're an agency, or if you're working for an organization and you don't know how to spend your marketing dollars and you need help with that, it's a great platform. Thank you so much, Tim. Speak soon.